You may now kiss the bride, Father Michael announces, his voice echoing through St. Mary's Cathedral like a blessing that carries both joy and solemnity. Sarah Matthews adjusts her matron of honor dress for the third time in 10 minutes, the silk fabric suddenly feeling too tight around her 42-year-old frame. She watches her younger sister Emma beam with unbridled joy, the kind of happiness that radiates from deep within and touches everyone in its vicinity. At 5 months pregnant, Emma glows with that ethereal beauty that comes from carrying new life, her vintage lace dress flowing perfectly around her growing belly. Her new husband Jake looks at her like she hung the moon and stars specifically for him, his eyes never leaving her face, even as the congregation applauds. Sarah has attended dozens of weddings over the years, society events where appearances mattered more than feelings, business networking disguised as celebrations of love. But this wedding feels different, authentic in a way that makes her chest tighten with something she can't quite name. Maybe it's the way Emma's laugh carries genuine delight, or how Jake's hands shake slightly as he slides the ring onto her finger. Or perhaps it's the realization that Sarah herself has forgotten what real happiness looks like. Beautiful ceremony, whispers David, Sarah's husband of 20 years, sliding his arm around her waist with practiced precision. His $1,000 Italian suit fits him perfectly, tailored to emphasize his broad shoulders and trim waist. At 45, David Matthews commands attention wherever he goes, 6 feet 2 inches of confidence and success wrapped in expensive fabric and cologne that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Everything about their life together is meticulously planned and executed, from their Manhattan penthouse to their weekend house in the Hamptons, from the charity galas they attend to the vacation destinations they choose. Sarah nods in response to his comment, but something feels off, like a discordant note in an otherwise perfect symphony. David's grip around her waist is tighter than usual, possessive rather than affectionate. His smile, the one he wears for public consumption, doesn't reach his eyes. After 2 decades of marriage to Manhattan's most successful hedge fund manager, Sarah has learned to read these subtle signs the way meteorologists read storm patterns. The pressure is building, and she can sense the change in the atmosphere even when others see only clear skies. The flowers are gorgeous, Sarah murmurs, trying to fill the silence that has become increasingly common between them. Emma has good taste, David replies, but his attention is already elsewhere, scanning the crowd of wedding guests with the calculating gaze of a businessman identifying potential opportunities. I see the Hendersons are here. I should speak with Robert about the new fund. Of course, Sarah thinks. Even at his sister-in-law's wedding, David is networking. She wonders when their marriage became just another business relationship. All strategic moves and calculated responses with no room for spontaneity or genuine emotion. The wedding party begins to process down the aisle, and Sarah catches Father Michael's eye. Her older brother looks distinguished in his ceremonial robes, his salt and pepper hair giving him an air of wisdom that complements his gentle demeanor. But she notices something troubling stress lines around his eyes that weren't there last Christmas, a tightness in his smile that suggests he's carrying burdens he hasn't shared with the family. Michael has always been the protector, the one everyone turns to in times of crisis. But who does he turn to when he needs support? Shall we? David offers his arm as they prepare to follow the wedding party to the reception. Sarah takes his arm, maintaining the appearance of marital harmony they've perfected over the years. As they walk through the cathedral doors, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns on the stone floor, she can't shake the feeling that something significant is about to change. It's more than intuition. It's the kind of bone-deep certainty that comes just before your life takes an unexpected turn. The reception is held at the Riverside Manor, a restored Victorian mansion overlooking the Hudson River. The venue is elegant without being ostentatious, exactly the kind of place Emma would choose: beautiful but not intimidating, expensive but not showy. Round tables covered in cream linens and adorned with centerpieces of white roses and baby's breath create an atmosphere of understated sophistication. The bridal party table overlooks the river, where sailboats drift lazily in the afternoon sunshine. Sarah mingles with relatives she hasn't seen in years, distant cousins and family friends who remember her as Michael's little sister and Emma's protective big sister. Everyone wants to hear about her life in the city, her involvement with various charitable organizations, David's latest business successes that occasionally make the financial pages of major newspapers. Sarah, darling, you look absolutely radiant, gushes Aunt Margaret, her mother's sister who still lives in their hometown. Marriage certainly agrees with you. 20 years, isn't it? That's quite an accomplishment in this day and age. If only she knew the truth, Sarah thinks while maintaining her practiced smile. If only she understood the empty conversations over breakfast when David bothers to eat at home. The way they sleep in separate bedrooms now because his work stress requires undisturbed rest. The gradual shift of his attention from their marriage to his business empire and his increasingly frequent business dinners with Jessica, his 25-year-old assistant with perfect legs and unlimited ambition. We're very blessed, Sarah responds automatically, the words feeling like ash in her mouth. David works so hard to provide for us. And what about children? You two would make such beautiful babies. The question hits like a physical blow. Children had been part of their plan once, discussed during those early years when they still talked about dreams and possibilities. But David's focus shifted to building his investment firm, and somehow there was never the right time. Now, at 42, Sarah wonders if she missed her chance at motherhood while waiting for the perfect moment that never came. We're focused on our careers right now, she deflects, hating how cold and corporate she sounds. Across the reception hall, David is deep in conversation with three other men, their body language suggesting they're discussing business rather than celebrating Emma's happiness. Sarah recognizes the signs, the subtle lean in, the discreet exchange of business cards, the way David's eyes light up when he talks about money and deals and market opportunities. She used to find his passion for business attractive, but now it feels like an addiction that consumes everything else in his life. Ladies and gentlemen, the DJ announces over the sound system, it's time for the bouquet toss. Emma stands at the center of the dance floor, her wedding dress catching the light from the chandeliers overhead. The vintage lace seems to shimmer as she moves, and Sarah is struck by how young and hopeful her sister looks. 28 years old with her whole life ahead of her, married to a man who clearly adores her, expecting their first child in 4 months. Emma represents everything Sarah thought she wanted at that age, everything she believed marriage could be. Single women gather behind Emma, laughing and good-naturedly jostling for position. Sarah recognizes some of Emma's college friends, a few cousins and several women from Jake's side of the family. They're all young and optimistic, believing in the tradition that catching the bouquet means they'll be next to find love and happiness. "Come on, Sarah," Emma calls out, turning to locate her sister in the crowd. "You need to catch it for good luck." "I'm already married, sweetheart," Sarah laughs, but the sound feels forced even to her own ears. This is for the single ladies. "Humor me," Emma insists, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Besides, maybe it means something different for married women. Maybe it means renewal or second chances. Something in Emma's tone suggests she's picked up on the tension in Sarah's marriage, though they haven't discussed it directly. Sarah joins the group of women, feeling slightly ridiculous at 42, but unable to deny her sister anything on her wedding day. Emma turns her back to the group and raises the bouquet, white roses and stephanotis, bound with cream silk ribbon high above her head. The women behind her crane their necks and extend their arms, laughing and shrieking in anticipation. The bouquet arcs through the air in what seems like slow motion, spinning end over end as it travels. Sarah watches its trajectory, not particularly trying to catch it, but not avoiding it either. To her complete surprise, it lands directly in her outstretched hands, the silk ribbon wrapping around her fingers like it was meant to be there. The crowd erupts in cheers and applause. Sarah stares down at the bouquet, its white roses still perfect despite their journey, and feels an unexpected surge of emotion. For just a moment, she allows herself to imagine what Emma suggested: renewal, second chances, the possibility that it's not too late to reclaim the happiness she thought she'd lost forever. Well, David's voice cuts through her reverie as he approaches, his expression unreadable. "Looks like someone's trying to tell us something." There's an edge to his voice that only Sarah recognizes, a subtle warning that she's attracted more attention than he deems appropriate. In David's world, everything is about image and control, and spontaneous moments like this don't fit his carefully managed narrative. "Just lucky, I guess," Sarah replies, but she doesn't put the bouquet down. The DJ announces the married couple's dance, and David extends his hand with the mechanical politeness that has replaced genuine affection in their relationship. They move on to the dance floor along with other married couples, ranging from newlyweds who can barely keep their hands off each other to elderly couples who move together with the grace that comes from decades of shared steps. Sarah and David dance together like strangers who happen to know the same routine. His hand rests on her waist with practiced correctness, maintaining appropriate distance and positioning. They move in perfect synchronization, the product of years of attending social events where their performance as a couple was crucial to David's business image. But there's no warmth in his touch, no intimacy in their proximity. They're two actors playing the roles of a happily married couple for an audience that has no idea they're watching a performance. "We should talk when we get home," David murmurs near her ear, his breath warm against her skin, but his words cold as winter. Sarah's stomach drops like she's in a free-falling elevator. In their marriage, "We should talk" has become code for, "I've made a decision that will affect your life, and I'm going to inform you of it." These conversations never involve actual discussion or mutual decision-making. They're David's way of maintaining the illusion of partnership while exercising complete control. About what, she asks, though she's not sure she wants to know the answer. "Not here. Not now." Across the dance floor, Sarah spots Father Michael engaged in what appears to be an intense conversation with a woman she doesn't recognize. The woman is dressed in an expensive black cocktail dress, her blonde hair styled in a sophisticated chignon. She looks upset, and Michael's body language suggests he's delivering news that no one wants to hear. His hands are clasped behind his back, his shoulders tense, his face wearing the expression Sarah remembers from their childhood when he had to tell their parents about some crisis or emergency. "You're distracted," David observes, following her gaze across the room. "Just watching Michael. He seems to be having a serious conversation with someone I don't know." "Your brother always was too involved in other people's problems," David says dismissively. "That's what happens when you choose idealism over success. Michael could have been a successful lawyer, but instead he chose to be a priest who makes $40,000 a year and spends his time counseling people who refuse to help themselves." The comment stings more than Sarah expects it to. Michael chose service over money, compassion over profit, meaning over material success. He dedicated his life to helping others find peace and purpose, and David has never respected that choice. In David's worldview, everything and everyone can be valued in dollars and cents, and anything that can't be monetized is worthless. "Michael is happy with his choices," Sarah says quietly. "Happiness doesn't pay for retirement or health care or anything else that matters in the real world." Sarah wants to argue that happiness might be the only thing that truly matters, but she's learned over the years that David interprets disagreement as disloyalty. Instead, she focuses on the music and tries to remember what it felt like when dancing with her husband brought her joy instead of obligation. The song ends, and they separate with polite smiles for the benefit of anyone watching. David immediately gravitates toward a group of successful-looking men who are discussing market trends and investment opportunities near the bar. Sarah watches him slip seamlessly into business mode, his face lighting up with genuine enthusiasm for the first time all day. This is when David is most himself, when he's talking about money, deals, and the intoxicating rush of financial conquest. "Sarah, can I talk to you privately?" Father Michael appears at her elbow, having extracted himself from his conversation with the mysterious woman in black. They step into a quiet alcove near the manor's library, away from the reception noise and festivities. Michael's ceremonial robes make him look imposing, but Sarah can see the worry in his eyes that he's trying to hide from the other wedding guests. "I need to tell you something important," Michael begins, his voice heavy with the weight of unwelcome knowledge. "That woman I was speaking with earlier, her name is Rebecca Cooper. She's a private investigator." Sarah's blood turns to ice water in her veins. "A private investigator. Why would you be talking to—" She stops mid-sentence as the implications hit her. "Oh God, Michael, what has David done?" She was hired to investigate David's business practices. "Sarah, there are some very serious allegations about fraudulent activities at his firm, systematic theft from client accounts, money laundering, tax evasion." The list goes on. The reception continues around them, but Sarah feels like she's been transported to an alternate reality where everything she thought she knew about her life is suddenly questionable. The room seems to spin slightly, and she grips the back of an antique chair for support. "That's impossible," she whispers. But even as she says it, she knows it isn't impossible at all. It would explain David's recent stress, his secretive phone calls, his sudden interest in offshore banking that he claimed was for tax optimization. David would never, she starts, then stops. The truth is, she doesn't know what David would or wouldn't do anymore. The man she married 20 years ago might not have been capable of financial crimes, but that man has been replaced by someone harder, colder, more focused on winning at any cost. Rebecca has evidence, Michael continues gently. Financial records, email exchanges, bank transfer documents, recorded phone conversations. She approached me because she knows I'm your brother, and she wanted to warn you before the story breaks publicly. How long has this been going on? Sarah's voice is barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might make the nightmare more real. Michael's face is grave, every line etched with the burden of knowledge he never wanted to carry. According to Rebecca's investigation, the fraudulent activities have been happening for at least 3 years, possibly longer. But Sarah, there's something else you need to know, something that might be even harder to hear. Sarah braces herself, gripping the chair so tightly her knuckles turn white. In the space of 5 minutes, her understanding of her marriage, her life, her future has been completely upended. How much worse can it get? During her surveillance of David's activities, Rebecca documented him meeting regularly with another woman, a young blonde woman who appears to be very close to him. They've been seen together at restaurants, hotels, entering and leaving apartment buildings together at unusual hours. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. She thinks immediately of Jessica, David's assistant with her perfect figure, ambitious smile, and the way she looks at David like he's the most fascinating man in the world. Jessica, who calls David's private line at all hours, who accompanies him on business trips that seem to last longer than necessary, who somehow always needs to work late on the same nights David claims he has important client meetings. Jessica, Sarah says, the name tasting bitter in her mouth. Michael nods grimly. Rebecca didn't want to identify her specifically, but yes, the description matches your husband's assistant. Sarah feels like she's been living in a carefully constructed stage set, and someone has just pulled back the curtains to reveal that everything she thought was real is actually elaborate scenery hiding an ugly truth. Her millionaire ex-husband, and she realizes with crystal clarity that's what David is going to become, has been systematically betraying her in every possible way. Maybe there's an explanation, Sarah says, desperately grasping for any alternative to the obvious conclusion. David's always been aggressive in business, willing to take risks that other people wouldn't consider, but he's not a criminal. And the woman could be anyone, a client, a colleague, someone helping him with legitimate business matters. Even as she speaks, Sarah knows she's deluding herself. The signs have been there for months, maybe years, but she chose to ignore them. The late-night phone calls that David took in his study with the door closed, the sudden interest in Swiss banking and offshore investment strategies, the way he started working out more frequently and buying expensive new clothes, the gradual shift from sharing details about his business to giving her vague non-answers when she asked about his day. I'm telling you this because I love you, Michael says, taking her hands in his. And because you need to prepare yourself for what's coming. If these allegations are true, David could face serious criminal charges, prison time, and Sarah, you need to think about protecting yourself legally and financially. What do you mean? If David has been stealing from clients, those assets could be seized. Your house, your bank accounts, your investments, anything connected to his business activities could be frozen or confiscated. You might find yourself with nothing. The full scope of her potential disaster begins to dawn on Sarah. She doesn't have independent income. She gave up her career in social work when she married David, at his insistence that his wife shouldn't need to work. Her name is on their joint accounts, but David manages all their finances. She doesn't even know how much money they have or where it's kept. In trying to be the perfect wife, she made herself completely financially dependent on a man who might be a criminal. I feel so stupid, she whispers. You're not stupid. Sarah, you're trusting. There's a difference. Men like David are experts at manipulation and control. They create elaborate facades to hide their true nature, and they're very good at making the people closest to them feel like they're imagining problems that don't exist. This is what narcissistic abuse looks like, Sarah realizes. Not just the obvious forms like shouting or physical violence, but the subtle erosion of her reality, her confidence, her ability to trust her own perceptions. David has spent years making her doubt herself while positioning himself as the rational, successful one whose judgment should never be questioned. What should I do? Sarah asks. Be careful. Don't confront him about any of this until we know more about the investigation and can ensure your safety. Rebecca wants to meet with you tomorrow, and I think you should hear what she has to say. Tomorrow is Sunday. Where would we meet? My office at the church. 2 o'clock. Rebecca will bring copies of some of the evidence so you can see for yourself what we're dealing with. They rejoin the reception, but Sarah moves through the remaining celebrations like a sleepwalker navigating a familiar but suddenly foreign landscape. Every interaction feels surreal. When David's business associates compliment him on his latest investment successes, Sarah wonders if they're unknowingly praising criminal activities. When relatives comment on their beautiful life together, she wants to laugh hysterically at the irony. She watches David work the room with his characteristic charm and confidence. He tells amusing anecdotes about market volatility, offers insightful commentary on economic trends, and projects the image of a man completely in control of his world. This is her millionaire ex-husband in training. Sarah realizes with startling clarity, already emotionally separated from their marriage, even while maintaining the public performance of being her devoted spouse. You seem distant tonight, Emma observes when she finds Sarah standing alone on the manor's terrace, looking out at the river where lights from passing boats create ripples of gold on the dark water. Just taking a moment to enjoy the quiet. Sarah lies. It's been a long day. Oui, Sarah, are you and David okay? I don't want to pry, but you both seem, I don't know, disconnected somehow. Emma has always been perceptive. Even as a child, she could sense tension and unhappiness that others missed, and apparently that ability hasn't diminished with age. We're fine, Sarah says automatically. Just tired. David's been working on a big deal that's been very stressful. That's not what I mean, and you know it. Emma moves closer, lowering her voice. Sarah, you can talk to me. Whatever it is, you don't have to handle it alone. For a moment, Sarah considers telling Emma everything: the investigation, the suspected affair, the growing realization that her marriage has been a lie for years. But this is Emma's wedding day, and she's pregnant with her first child. Sarah refuses to taint this perfect moment with her personal disasters. I promise I'm okay, Sarah says, forcing a smile. And even if I weren't, today is about you and Jake and the beautiful life you're building together. Nothing else matters. You matter to me, Emma says fiercely. You've always taken care of everyone else, but who takes care of you? The question hits deeper than Emma probably intended. Sarah has spent 20 years trying to be the perfect wife, the ideal partner for David's ambitions, the supportive spouse who never makes demands or causes problems. But who has been supporting her? Who has been concerned about her happiness, her dreams, her needs? I take care of myself, Sarah says, but the words sound hollow even to her. Promise me something, Emma says, taking Sarah's hands. Promise me that if you ever need help, if you ever need someone to talk to or somewhere to go, you'll call me, day or night, no matter what's happening in my life. Promise me. Emma, promise me. Sarah, I promise. They hug tightly, and Sarah allows herself to absorb some comfort from her sister's fierce protectiveness. Whatever happens next, she won't be completely alone. The evening winds down with cake cutting and final toasts. Sarah helps Emma change out of her wedding dress and into her going-away outfit, a cream-colored suit that will be perfect for their honeymoon in Tuscany. Jake waits outside the bridal suite, practically bouncing with excitement to begin their married life together. Thank you for everything, Emma says as Sarah fastens the pearl necklace that was their grandmother's. This day was perfect, and a lot of that is because you helped make it happen. You deserve all the happiness in the world, Sarah says, meaning every word. As Emma and Jake leave for their honeymoon amid a shower of birdseed and well wishes, Sarah feels a profound sense of loneliness. She watches their car disappear into the night, carrying them toward a future full of possibilities and shared dreams. The drive home to Manhattan is quiet. David scrolls through emails on his phone while Sarah stares out the window at the city lights blurring past. The silence between them feels heavier than usual. loaded with secrets and unspoken tensions. "Did you enjoy the wedding?" David asked absently, not looking up from his phone. "It was beautiful. Emma looked so happy." "Happiness is a luxury young people think they can afford," he says, his voice carrying a cynicism that chills Sarah. "Wait until reality hits. Wait until they realize that love doesn't pay the bills or solve real problems." The comment reveals more about David's current mindset than he probably intended. Sarah wonders when he became so bitter about love and happiness, or if he always felt this way and simply hid it better in the early years of their marriage. "They seem to have a good foundation," Sarah says carefully. "Jake makes decent money as an engineer, but it's not enough to support the lifestyle Emma's accustomed to. She grew up with financial security because of her sister's successful marriage." David glances at Sarah meaningfully. "Sometimes I wonder if she fully appreciates the sacrifices I've made to provide that security." Sacrifices. As if stealing money from clients and cheating on his wife are noble acts of self-denial rather than selfish choices that serve his own interests. "I appreciate everything you've provided," Sarah says, though the words feel like lies now. "Do you? Because lately I feel like you take our lifestyle for granted. The penthouse, the house in the Hamptons, the designer clothes, the charity galas, none of that happens by accident. It requires constant effort and vigilance." Sarah recognizes this pattern. David is laying the groundwork for something, building a narrative that will justify whatever he's planning to do next. He's positioning himself as the long-suffering provider and her as the ungrateful beneficiary who doesn't understand the real world. At home, David heads straight to his study while Sarah goes to their bedroom. She catches her reflection in the mirror, still attractive at 42, but tired in a way that goes beyond physical exhaustion. The woman looking back at her has spent 20 years trying to be perfect, and she's not sure she knows who she really is underneath that performance. Her phone buzzes with a text from Emma. "Thank you for making today so special. I love you, big sister. Can't wait to tell you all about Italy when we get back." Sarah types back, "I love you too. Enjoy every moment of your honeymoon." She doesn't mention that by the time Emma returns from Italy, Sarah's entire life might have imploded. She doesn't say that she's terrified about what she'll learn tomorrow when she meets with Rebecca Cooper. She doesn't admit that she's lying in bed alone while her husband works in another room, planning God knows what kind of betrayal or escape. "Sarah," David's voice calls from the hallway. "Yes. I'll be working very late tonight. Don't wait up for me." "All right." She hears his study door close, followed immediately by the sound of his phone ringing. The conversation is brief, exactly 2 minutes, as if he's coordinating something that requires precise timing. This pattern repeats 4 more times over the next hour, each call lasting exactly the same duration. Sarah lies awake listening to these mysterious phone calls, her mind racing with possibilities. Is he coordinating with Jessica, with offshore banks, with lawyers preparing for his defense, or his disappearance? Each ring of his phone feels like another nail in the coffin of their marriage. When she finally falls asleep near dawn, Sarah dreams that she's still at Emma's wedding, but instead of catching a bouquet, she's watching David being led away in handcuffs while Jessica cries dramatically for the cameras. In the dream, Sarah feels not sadness, but overwhelming relief, as if chains she didn't know she was wearing have finally been broken. She wakes with sunlight streaming through the bedroom windows and the strange certainty that her old life is about to end whether she's ready for it or not. Sarah jolts awake to the harsh buzzing of her cell phone on the nightstand. The digital clock glows an ominous 2:17 a.m., its red numbers seeming to pulse with urgency in the darkness. David is in the guest bedroom again. Another work-stressed night that has become their depressing new normal. She can hear him moving around, presumably taking one of the phone calls that have been coming at all hours for the past several weeks. "Hello," she answers groggily, her voice thick with sleep and confusion. "Mrs. Matthews, this is Detective Williams with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. I apologize for calling at this hour, but we need to speak with you about your husband's business activities." The words hit Sarah like a bucket of ice water, instantly clearing the fog of sleep from her brain. She sits up in bed, her heart hammering against her ribs as adrenaline floods her system. "I'm sorry, what time is it?" she asks, though she can see the clock clearly. "Ma'am, we have a warrant to search your residence this morning. We'll be there at 8 a.m. sharp. I strongly advise you to contact a lawyer immediately." The line goes dead, leaving Sarah staring at her phone in shock. The silence in the apartment feels oppressive, broken only by the sound of her own rapid breathing and the distant hum of city traffic far below their penthouse windows. Footsteps echo in the hallway, deliberate and measured. David appears in the doorway, already dressed in his running clothes despite the early hour. His Nike running shoes are laced, his moisture-wicking shirt and shorts are perfectly coordinated, and his expensive running watch glows softly on his wrist. Everything about his appearance suggests he's been awake for some time, preparing for this moment. "Who was that?" he asked with studied casualness, but Sarah can see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clench and unclench at his sides. "The police! They're coming here this morning with a search warrant." David's face goes pale for just a moment before hardening into an expression Sarah has never seen before: cold, calculating, almost predatory. This isn't the face of an innocent man wrongly accused. This is the face of someone who has been caught and is now shifting into survival mode. "Listen to me very carefully," he says, his voice dropping to a low, authoritative tone. "Don't answer any questions beyond what's absolutely necessary. Don't volunteer any information. Don't speculate about anything you might have seen or heard. And whatever you do, don't call your brother." "David, what is going on?" Sarah's voice cracks with the strain of trying to process this surreal situation. "It's a misunderstanding," he says smoothly, but his hands are trembling slightly as he adjusts his running watch. "Some disgruntled investors are making false accusations because they lost money in a volatile market. My lawyers will handle everything, and this will all blow over in a few weeks." But even as he speaks these reassuring words, David's body language tells a different story. This is not a man who believes he's the victim of false accusations. This is a man who has been planning for this exact scenario, preparing for the day when his carefully constructed house of cards would finally collapse. Sarah realizes with dawning horror that she's looking at a stranger wearing her husband's face. The man she married 20 years ago would have been outraged by police accusations. He would have demanded to know exactly what the authorities suspected, insisted on calling his lawyer immediately, probably threatened to sue everyone involved for harassment and defamation. That David would have fought back with righteous anger and moral indignation. This David calm, prepared, almost resigned to what's happening. This David knew this day was coming, possibly for months, maybe even years. He's been living a double life so completely that Sarah never suspected, never even imagined the scope of his deception. "I'm going for a run," he announces, as if this is a normal Sunday morning routine rather than the hours before a federal raid. "When I get back, we'll deal with this together. Remember what I told you about not answering questions?" He leans down and kisses her forehead, the gesture feeling more like goodbye than reassurance. His lips are cold against her skin, and there's something final about the way he lingers for just a moment before pulling away. "David, wait." But he's already gone, his footsteps receding down the hallway, followed by the soft click of the front door closing. Sarah is left alone in their bedroom, surrounded by the trappings of wealth and success that now feel like evidence of criminal activity. She calls Michael immediately, her fingers shaking as she dials his number. "Michael, they're coming to search the house. The police. They have a warrant." "I'll be right over," Michael says without hesitation. "Sarah, listen to me carefully. Don't touch anything in David's office or study. Don't try to clean up or hide anything. Just get dressed and wait for me." "Michael, I'm scared." "I know you are. But remember what I told you yesterday, you're stronger than you think. We're going to get through this together." Sarah makes coffee with trembling hands, trying to process what's happening to her life. Every familiar object in their kitchen seems foreign now, potentially tainted by association with David's crimes. The espresso machine he bought in Italy, the French copper pots that cost more than most people's monthly salary, the wine collection he's been building for years, all of it could be evidence. All of it could be seized. All of it represents a lifestyle built on lies and stolen money. The narcissistic abuse she's endured for years suddenly has a name and context. David didn't just control her emotionally and psychologically, he controlled her financially, ensuring she was completely dependent on him while he built a criminal empire she knew nothing about. Every time she questioned their lifestyle or asked about their finances, he made her feel stupid and ungrateful. Every time she expressed interest in returning to work or pursuing her own interests, he convinced her that supporting his career was more important. At exactly 8 a.m., The building's doorman calls up to announce that federal agents are in the lobby. Sarah buzzes them up, her heart pounding so hard she can feel it in her throat. Within minutes, 6 federal agents are standing in her living room, showing her official paperwork that makes this nightmare undeniably real. Detective Williams turns out to be a professional woman in her 40s, with graying hair and kind but serious eyes. She's dressed in a navy blue suit and carries herself with the authority of someone who has spent years dealing with white-collar criminals and their families. "Mrs. Matthews, I'm Detective Williams. We spoke on the phone. I want you to know that this is nothing personal against you. We're looking for financial documents, computer equipment, anything related to Matthews Investment Management." Sarah nods numbly, watching as the agents spread throughout her home with practiced efficiency. They photograph everything before touching it, bag items in clear plastic evidence containers, and maintain detailed logs of everything they confiscate. The process is both more civilized and more devastating than she expected. "Mrs. Matthews," Detective Williams sits beside her on the cream-colored sofa that David insisted they buy because it projected the right image for their social status. "I need to ask you some questions. You have the right to have an attorney present, and you can stop answering at any time. Am I under arrest?" "No, you're not. Based on our investigation so far, we have no evidence that you were involved in or aware of your husband's illegal activities. But we do need to understand your role in the household finances." "David handles all our money," Sarah admits, feeling foolish even as she says it. "I don't have access to the business accounts, and I don't really understand how his investment firm works. Are you aware of any unusual financial activities, large cash deposits, wire transfers to offshore accounts, unexplained luxury purchases?" Sarah thinks about their lifestyle, the Manhattan penthouse worth $3 million, the house in the Hamptons they use maybe 6 weekends a year, David's collection of vintage watches that he keeps in a climate-controlled safe, her closet full of designer clothes that she rarely wears. "Has all of this been purchased with stolen money? I don't handle day-to-day finances," she repeats. "David gives me a credit card for personal expenses, but he manages all the investments and accounts." "Have you noticed any changes in his behavior recently? Increased stress, secretiveness, unusual travel patterns?" The question forces Sarah to confront something she's been trying to ignore for months. How many wives have sat exactly where she's sitting right now, realizing they've been living with a stranger, the financial security they took for granted, the trust they never questioned, how quickly it can all disappear when you discover that the person you trusted most has been lying to you about everything. It's a universal fear that transcends class and education, the terror of discovering that your entire life has been built on deception. "He's been different," Sarah says carefully, trying to find words that won't sound like she's betraying her husband while also being honest with the authorities. "More stressed, working longer hours, taking calls at unusual times. But I thought it was just normal business pressure." "What about travel? Has he been taking more business trips than usual?" "Yes, but again, I assumed it was related to expanding the business or meeting with international clients." One agent emerges from David's home office carrying a box filled with files and documents. "Detective, you need to see this," he calls out. Detective Williams excuses herself and joins the huddle of agents examining whatever they've discovered. Sarah can't see the specific documents, but their body language tells her everything she needs to know. This isn't a fishing expedition based on vague suspicions. They found exactly what they were looking for, which means their investigation is much more advanced than she realized. Sarah's phone rings, David calling. The sound makes everyone in the room look up. "Don't answer that," Detective Williams advises, returning to Sarah's side. "We're monitoring his communications, and anything you say could complicate our investigation." Sarah stares at David's photo on her phone screen, the professional headshot they had taken for a charity auction program 2 years ago. He looks confident, successful, trustworthy, everything she thought he was. The man in that photo appears incapable of the crimes being investigated in their home. Michael arrives just as the agents are finishing their search. His presence brings Sarah a measure of comfort, though she can see the concern in his eyes as he surveys the systematic dismantling of her life. "How are you holding up?" he asks, sitting beside her and taking her hand. "I feel like I'm living in someone else's nightmare," she admits. Detective Williams approaches them with a manila folder. "Mr. Father Michael, I presume your sister has been very cooperative. We appreciate her assistance. What happens now? Michael asks. We'll be analyzing the evidence we've collected today. Mrs. Matthews, I want you to know that based on our investigation so far, we don't believe you were involved in your husband's activities. However, I strongly encourage you to consult with an attorney about protecting your personal assets. What does that mean? Sarah asks. It means that if your husband has been using marital assets to commit crimes or hide stolen money, those assets could be subject to forfeiture. You may want to consider legal separation to protect whatever assets are legitimately yours. After the agents leave, Sarah collapses onto her sofa, emotionally exhausted. Her home feels violated, every surface fingerprinted or photographed, every private space invaded and cataloged. It's all true, isn't it? She asked Michael. I'm afraid so. Rebecca Cooper called me this morning with more details. The evidence against David is overwhelming. 20 years of marriage, and I never suspected anything. That's not your fault. Sarah, men like David are expert manipulators. They compartmentalize their lives so completely that even the people closest to them have no idea what they're really doing. Sarah thinks about all the charity galas where David was praised for his generosity, all the business articles that described him as a brilliant investor and philanthropist. How many people had he fooled? How many lives had he destroyed while maintaining his reputation as a pillar of the community? What do I do now? She asks. First, you hire a lawyer to protect your interests. Then you decide who you want to be when this is all over. I don't understand. Sarah, you've spent 20 years being Mrs. David Matthews, the perfect wife of a successful businessman, but David is going to prison, and that identity is going to disappear. The question is, who is Sarah without him? The question terrifies her more than the federal investigation. She's been playing a role for so long that she's lost touch with her authentic self. Her midlife transformation is about to begin, whether she's ready for it or not, and she has no idea who she'll become on the other side of this disaster. 3 days after the search, Sarah's apartment still feels like a crime scene. Evidence tape has been removed, but she can see the ghost outlines where items were photographed, the subtle disruption of a life that has been professionally investigated. Every surface reminds her that federal agents spent hours documenting her existence, cataloging the remnants of a marriage she's beginning to realize was always an illusion. Sarah needs to escape the suffocating atmosphere of her home, where every corner holds memories that have been retrospectively tainted by the knowledge of David's crimes. She walks to her favorite coffee shop near Central Park, a small independent place called Grind Coffee that she discovered years ago during one of her solitary walks when David was traveling for business. The shop has mismatched furniture, exposed brick walls covered with local artwork, and the kind of authentic atmosphere that David always dismissed as trying too hard to be bohemian. She orders her usual a large coffee with oat milk and a touch of vanilla syrup and finds her preferred corner table near the window where she can watch people walking their dogs in the park. She's brought a book, one of the novels Emma recommended months ago that Sarah never found time to read when her life was consumed with maintaining the perfect image of a successful businessman's wife. The familiar routine of coffee and reading feels comforting, a small piece of normalcy in a world that has been turned completely upside down. Sarah opens her book and tries to lose herself in someone else's story, anything to escape from the nightmare of her own life. She's been reading for perhaps 20 minutes when she hears a familiar voice at the table directly behind her, speaking in low, urgent tones. The feds have everything. David's voice barely above a whisper, but unmistakably his. Bank records, email chains, documentation of the offshore accounts, recordings of client calls. It's completely over. Jessica. Sarah freezes, her coffee cup halfway to her lips, every muscle in her body going rigid with shock. She doesn't dare turn around, doesn't dare move, barely dares to breathe. Instead, she angles her head slightly and strains to hear every word of the conversation happening just inches behind her. What about your wife? Does she know anything? A young woman's voice, definitely Jessica, David's assistant. Sarah has heard that voice countless times during business calls, always professional and deferential when she knew Sarah was listening. Sarah doesn't know anything substantial, David replies, his voice carrying a casual dismissiveness that cuts through Sarah like a knife. She never paid attention to the business side of our life. She was too busy playing the perfect society wife, attending charity lunches and shopping for designer clothes. The cruelty in his voice is breathtaking. 20 years of marriage, 20 years of supporting his career and maintaining his image, dismissed as playing a role. Sarah grips her coffee cup so tightly her knuckles turn white, fighting the urge to turn around and confront him. But what if she finds out about us, about our relationship? Jessica's voice wavers with anxiety. She won't, David says with complete confidence. Sarah sees what she wants to see. She's been living in denial for years, pretending our marriage is something it isn't. She's invested too much of her identity in being my wife to acknowledge that it's been over for a long time. Sarah's breathing becomes audible as she struggles to remain calm and invisible. The narcissistic abuse is continuing even now, even when he thinks she can't hear him. He's rewriting their entire relationship to justify his betrayal, making her the naive fool who was too stupid to see what was happening right in front of her face. David, I'm scared, Jessica continues. What if they arrest you? What happens to me? They won't arrest me, David says with the arrogance that Sarah now recognizes as pathological. I've been moving money offshore for over 2 years. I have accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Singapore, countries that don't have extradition treaties with the United States. By the time this goes to trial, we'll be living comfortably on a beach somewhere, drinking champagne and laughing about the idiots who thought they could outsmart me. We, Jessica asks, and Sarah can hear the hope and vulnerability in her voice. Of course we, David responds, his tone becoming warmer and more intimate than Sarah has heard him use in years. Jessica, you're the only good thing that's happened to me in a long time. You understand my ambitions. You appreciate what I've accomplished. You don't take everything I've given you for granted. Sarah and I have been over for years. She just doesn't know it yet. The betrayal is complete and systematic. Financial crimes, emotional infidelity, and now planned abandonment. David has destroyed every aspect of their marriage while maintaining the facade of respectability. Sarah realizes she's been married to a sociopath who views other people as objects to be used and discarded when they are no longer useful. When will you tell her? Jessica asks. After Emma's honeymoon, David replies. I don't want the family drama to interfere with her sister's happiness. But once Emma and Jake get back from Italy, I'll inform Sarah that our marriage is over and that I'm moving on with my life. Sarah realizes they're talking about events that happened just 3 days ago, which means David has been planning this conversation for months, possibly longer. Even while he was going through the motions of being her husband at Emma's wedding, he was already mentally divorced from their marriage and planning his escape with his much younger girlfriend. What about the house, the accounts, all the money? Jessica asks. All handled, David says with satisfaction. I've been slowly transferring assets to accounts that Sarah doesn't know about and can't access. When I disappear, there won't be anything left for the feds to seize. Sarah will have to figure out how to support herself, but that's not my problem anymore. Won't she be suspicious if money starts disappearing? Sarah has never paid attention to our finances. She gets her credit card bill paid automatically. Her personal checking account gets a monthly deposit. And beyond that, she doesn't ask questions. She's been content to let me handle all the adult responsibilities while she focuses on her charity work and social activities. The condescension is staggering. David is portraying her as a pampered, irresponsible child while positioning himself as the long-suffering provider who's been taken advantage of by an ungrateful wife. He's rewriting their entire relationship to justify what he's about to do to her. And Sarah, Jessica asks again. Sarah will figure out how to survive, David says coldly. She's tougher than she looks, even if she doesn't know it yet. Besides, she'll probably be better off without me. She can find some nice, boring man who wants to live a simple life and have children and do all the domestic things that bore me to death. Sarah wants to scream, to throw her coffee in his face, to stand up and announce to the entire coffee shop that they're sitting next to a criminal who's planning to abandon his wife and flee the country with stolen money. Instead, she forces herself to remain motionless and continue listening. This information could be crucial to her survival. I love you, David, Jessica says, her voice thick with emotion. I love you too, baby, David responds with genuine warmth. You've made this whole nightmare bearable. In 6 months, we'll be sitting on a beach in a country with no extradition treaty, and all of this will seem like a bad dream. What if Sarah fights the divorce? What if she tries to claim half of everything? David laughs, a sound devoid of warmth or humor. Half of what? By the time I'm finished, there won't be anything for her to claim. I've been planning this exit strategy for 3 years. Jessica, every contingency has been considered. Sarah hears chairs scraping as they prepare to leave. She quickly pulls out her phone and pretends to be deep in conversation, turning her face toward the window to avoid being recognized. Mom? Yes, I'm fine, she says loudly into the silent phone. Just having coffee before my appointment with the financial planner. Through her peripheral vision, she watches David and Jessica leave together. Jessica is everything Sarah used to be 20 years ago. Young, blonde, eager to please, completely convinced that David's success and confidence make him worthy of her devotion. She has no idea that she's in love with a man who will eventually betray her just as completely as he's betraying Sarah. David looks relaxed and happy in a way Sarah hasn't seen in years. His arm is around Jessica's waist, and he's leaning down to whisper something in her ear that makes her laugh. They look like a couple celebrating their good fortune, not criminals planning to flee the country with stolen money. After they're gone, Sarah sits in the coffee shop for another hour, processing what she's learned. David isn't just leaving her, he's systematically destroying her financially to fund his escape and new life. The man she married, the father figure she thought she knew, is a sociopath who views her as an obstacle to be removed rather than a person deserving of basic human consideration. She finally understands what Dr. Chen, the therapist she's been seeing since the federal raid, meant when she talked about narcissistic abuse. It's not just emotional manipulation, it's the complete devaluation of another person's humanity. David has convinced himself that Sarah deserves whatever happens to her because she failed to appreciate the wonderful life he provided. In his mind, her destruction is justified because she didn't worship him sufficiently. Sarah calls Michael from the coffee shop, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her mind. I need to see you immediately, and bring Rebecca Cooper. What happened? I just overheard David and Jessica planning their escape strategy. Michael, he's not just committing financial crimes, he's been systematically stealing my money to fund his disappearance. He's planning to leave me with nothing. Sarah, where are you? The coffee shop on 72nd Street near the park? Michael, I think I'm ready to fight back. It will be right there. Sarah orders another coffee and waits. For the first time since this nightmare began, she feels something other than fear and despair. She feels angry, and anger, she's beginning to discover, is a much more useful emotion than grief. Anger motivates action, demands justice, refuses to accept victimization as inevitable. When Michael and Rebecca arrive 30 minutes later, Sarah recounts everything she overheard, word for word. Rebecca takes detailed notes while Michael's face grows increasingly grim. This is perfect, Rebecca says when Sarah finishes her account. We can use this information to freeze his remaining assets and prevent him from leaving the country. How we go to the district attorney immediately. With your testimony about what you overheard, combined with the evidence we've already gathered, they can get an emergency injunction to freeze all accounts associated with David and prevent him from international travel. But I wasn't supposed to be listening. Is it legal evidence? You were in a public place, and they spoke loudly enough for other patrons to overhear. It's completely legal, Rebecca explains. Sarah, what you've given us could be the key to stopping David before he disappears forever. Michael takes Sarah's hand across the small cafe table. Are you ready for this? Once we take this step, there's no going back. Your marriage will be over, your life will change dramatically, and you'll probably have to testify in federal court. Sarah thinks about David's casual dismissal of 20 years of marriage, his cruel characterization of her as a naive woman who lived in denial, his complete lack of concern for what will happen to her when he disappears with his young girlfriend and her money. I'm ready, she says firmly. It's time for David to learn that I'm much stronger than he thinks I am. What do you want to happen to him? Rebecca asks. I want him to face the consequences of his choices. I want the people he's stolen from to get their money back. And I want him to understand that actions have consequences, even for men who think they're above the law. As they leave the coffee shop together, Sarah feels like she's shedding an old skin, transforming from victim to fighter. Her midlife transformation is beginning, and she's finally ready to discover who she really is when she's not trying to be David's perfect wife. The woman who caught the bouquet at Emma's wedding was hoping for renewal within her marriage. The woman walking toward the district attorney's office has discovered that sometimes the best renewal comes from having the courage to end what's already dead. Rebecca Cooper's office occupies the entire top floor of a converted brownstone on the Upper East Side, and nothing about it matches Sarah's expectations. Instead of the sterile corporate environment she anticipated, the space feels like a sophisticated living room designed by someone who understands that people reveal their secrets more easily when they feel comfortable and safe. Exposed brick walls are lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with law books, psychology texts, and what appears to be an extensive collection of mystery novels. Comfortable leather chairs surround a coffee table made from reclaimed wood, and plants of various sizes create a sense of warmth and life. The afternoon sunlight streaming through tall windows illuminates dust motes dancing in the air and gives the whole space an almost ethereal quality. Rebecca herself defies stereotypes as completely as her office does. In her 50s with graying hair that she wears in a sophisticated bob, she projects competence without intimidation. Her clothes are professional but not flashy, a well-cut blazer over dark jeans and comfortable flats that suggests someone who values substance over style. Most importantly, her eyes radiate the kind of intelligence and empathy that comes from years of helping people navigate their worst moments. Before we proceed with any plans, Rebecca says, settling into one of the leather chairs and opening a thick manila folder, I need you to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Your husband isn't just a white-collar criminal who got in over his head. He's a master manipulator who's been planning this exit strategy for years. She spreads out photographs and documents across the coffee table, like a detective laying out evidence in a murder investigation. Sarah recognizes some of the locations restaurants where she and David have eaten, the building where his office is located, even the lobby of their own apartment building. These photographs show David meeting with Jessica at various locations over the past 18 months, Rebecca explains, pointing to images that chronicle the development of their relationship. Based on their body language, the frequency of their meetings, and surveillance of their communications, we believe their romantic relationship began approximately 14 months ago. Sarah studies the photographs with a strange sense of detachment. In the early images, David and Jessica maintain professional distance, sitting across from each other at restaurant tables, walking side by side but not touching, maintaining the kind of careful boundaries appropriate for a boss and employee. But the later photographs tell a different story entirely. This timeline coincides exactly with when David began systematically moving money offshore. Rebecca continues, he's been preparing for this divorce settlement long before you knew there would be one. How much money are we talking about? Sarah asks, though she's not sure she wants to know the answer. Rebecca consults her notes. Based on what we've uncovered so far, approximately $12 million transferred from your joint accounts to various offshore holdings, plus an estimated $25 million stolen from his investment clients over the past 4 years. The numbers are staggering. Sarah knew they were wealthy, but she never understood the scope of their assets or how much money David controlled. More disturbing is the realization that their entire lifestyle was built on stolen money: the penthouse, the house in the Hamptons, the expensive cars, the designer clothes, the charitable donations that enhanced David's reputation in social circles. What happens to me when all this comes out? Sarah asks. That depends on how quickly we act and how effectively we can demonstrate your innocence, Michael says. If David succeeds in disappearing before the authorities can freeze his assets, you could literally be left with nothing. But if we move fast and get ahead of his plans— What do you need me to do? Rebecca leans forward, her expression serious. We need you to wear a wire. Sarah's stomach drops. A wire like in the movies. Exactly like in the movies, but much smaller and more sophisticated than what you've seen on television. The district attorney wants to build the strongest possible case against David, and they want to ensure maximum asset recovery for his victims. If we can get David to admit his crimes on tape, it will guarantee a conviction and give us the evidence we need to trace and recover all the money he's hidden. How would that work exactly? You would arrange to meet David somewhere private where you can have a conversation without interruption. You act like you've discovered some of his activities and want to discuss how to handle the situation together as a married couple. Let him think you want to be part of his escape plan. The idea terrifies Sarah on multiple levels. She's never been good at deception, and the thought of deliberately manipulating David feels foreign to her nature. But then she thinks about all the investors who've lost their retirement savings, all the people whose trust David violated, and her own complete financial ruin if he succeeds in disappearing. Would I be safe? We'll have agents positioned nearby, and the wire transmits in real time, so we'll hear everything as it happens. If David becomes suspicious or threatening, we can intervene immediately. Michael touches her arm gently. Sarah, you don't have to do this. We can find other ways to build a case against David. No, Sarah says with growing conviction. I want to do this. David has controlled and manipulated me for 20 years. He's convinced himself that I'm too naive and dependent to ever fight back. It's time for me to take some control of this situation. Rebecca explains how the wire works, a device no larger than a button that can be hidden in jewelry or sewn into clothing. It's virtually undetectable and records everything within a 20-foot radius with crystal clarity. The key to making this work is to act natural, Rebecca coaches. Remember, David thinks you're naive and completely dependent on him. Use his assumptions against him. Act like you admire his cleverness and want to understand his plans so you can support him. What if he suspects something? Men like David have enormous egos, Rebecca explains. They love to brag about their schemes, especially to someone they think is impressed by their intelligence. Your job is to ask the right questions and let him talk. They spend the next 2 hours rehearsing different scenarios and possible responses. Rebecca teaches Sarah how to ask open-ended questions that encourage David to incriminate himself, how to appear supportive while actually gathering evidence, how to keep him talking even if the conversation becomes uncomfortable. Remember, David believes you're completely under his control, Rebecca emphasizes. He thinks you're financially dependent, emotionally fragile, and intellectually inferior. Use those beliefs to your advantage. Let him feel superior while he destroys himself. As they prepare to leave, Sarah feels a mixture of terror and exhilaration that she's never experienced before. For the first time in her adult life, she's the one with the plan, the one with secret knowledge, the one in control of the situation. Sarah, Rebecca says as they walk toward the elevator, I want you to know that what you're doing takes incredible courage. Most women in your situation choose to look the other way, to enable their husband's crimes rather than risk losing their financial security. I thought about it, Sarah admits. It would be easier to pretend I never heard that conversation in the coffee shop, to convince myself that David will somehow work everything out without destroying innocent people. What changed your mind? I keep thinking about all the people David has hurt, all the families who've lost their savings because they trusted him. And I think about all the women who are living with financial abuse and narcissistic manipulation right now, convinced they have no choice but to stay with men who control and demean them. Michael nods approvingly. You're going to help a lot of people get justice. I hope so. But mostly, I just want David to face the consequences of his choices for once in his life. That evening, Sarah sits in her apartment staring at her phone. The wire is already in place, hidden in a pendant necklace that Rebecca assured her is completely undetectable. All she has to do is call David and arrange to meet him somewhere private. She thinks about the scared woman who caught the bouquet at Emma's wedding just 5 days ago. That woman was afraid of confrontation, afraid of change, afraid of discovering uncomfortable truths about her marriage. She was content to live in denial as long as it meant avoiding conflict and maintaining the illusion of security. This woman, the woman she's becoming, is afraid of letting David get away with destroying so many lives. She's afraid of spending the rest of her life wondering if she could have made a difference and chose not to. She's afraid of being the kind of person who enables evil through passivity and self-protection. Sarah picks up the phone and dials David's number, her heart pounding but her resolve steady. David, it's me. We need to talk. Sarah, what's wrong? You sound strange. I know about the investigation. I know about the offshore accounts. And I know about Jessica. Silence on the other end of the line, long enough that Sarah wonders if the call has been disconnected. We need to meet, Sarah continues, her voice stronger than she feels. There are things we need to discuss before this situation goes any further. Sarah, you don't understand what you're dealing with. I understand more than you think I do. Meet me at the apartment in 1 hour. We need to figure out how to handle this together. She hangs up before he can respond, her hands shaking slightly but her heart filled with determination. Rebecca and Michael are stationed in a van outside the building, along with 2 federal agents who will monitor every word of the conversation that's about to unfold. For 20 years, Sarah has been the passive partner in their marriage, the supporting character in David's story of success and ambition. Tonight, she becomes the protagonist of her own story, and David has no idea that his carefully constructed world is about to collapse around him. The woman who was terrified of confrontation is about to confront the most dangerous man she's ever known, and for the first time in years, Sarah feels truly alive. David arrives at their apartment exactly 1 hour after Sarah's phone call, using his key to enter with the confident stride of a man who still believes he controls his environment. Sarah is waiting in their living room, positioned carefully so that the hidden microphone will capture every word of their conversation. Her heart pounds against her ribs, but she forces herself to appear calm and composed. "How did you find out?" David asked without preamble, not bothering with pleasantries or pretense. His expensive business suit is slightly wrinkled, and there's a tension around his eyes that suggests he's been making urgent phone calls and contingency plans since receiving Sarah's call. "Does it matter how I found out?" Sarah responds, proud that her voice remains steady. "The question is, what do we do now?" David studies her face with the calculating gaze she's learned to recognize over 20 years of marriage. He's trying to determine how much she actually knows versus how much she's guessing, trying to decide whether she represents a threat to his plans or merely an obstacle to be managed. "That depends on what you think you know," he says carefully. Sarah forces herself to smile, remembering Rebecca's coaching about making David feel superior and in control. "David, I've been married to you for 20 years. I know you're brilliant. I know you always have a plan for everything. And I know you wouldn't have gotten yourself into this situation without having an exit strategy already in place." She sees him relax slightly, his ego responding exactly as Rebecca predicted it would. David has always needed to be the smartest person in any room, and the suggestion that Sarah recognizes his intellectual superiority appeals to his narcissistic nature. "You're right," he says, settling into the leather armchair across from her. "I do have a plan. Tell me about it." David leans forward like a professor preparing to educate a particularly slow student. "The federal investigation is mostly harassment based on complaints from investors who lost money in a volatile market. They can't prove any substantial wrongdoing because I've been very careful about documentation and legal compliance." Even as he speaks these words, David's body language contradicts his claims of innocence. His hands fidget with his expensive watch. His eyes dart toward the windows as if checking for surveillance. And there's a fine sheen of perspiration on his forehead, despite the apartment's perfect climate control. "But the media attention is going to be problematic for business," he continues. "Clients don't like their investment manager being investigated, even when the charges are baseless. So I think it's time for us to take an extended vacation somewhere with more favorable business conditions." "By us, you mean?" Sarah lets the question hang in the air. David pauses, and Sarah realizes he's trying to decide how much truth to reveal. "Sarah, our marriage has been struggling for years. We both know that. We've been living like roommates rather than husband and wife, going through the motions of a relationship that stopped being fulfilling a long time ago." The clinical way he describes the destruction of their marriage is chilling. There's no emotion in his voice, no acknowledgement that their problems might be related to his increasing coldness and emotional absence. In David's narrative, their marriage failed due to natural causes rather than his deliberate neglect and betrayal. "But you're still my wife," he continues, "and I won't leave you to deal with this mess alone. I think we should relocate internationally until this investigation blows over." "What about Jessica?" David's mask slips for just a moment, revealing something predatory underneath. "What about her? David, I saw you together. I know about your relationship. You saw me having business meetings with my assistant," he says smoothly. "If you're interpreting those interactions as something inappropriate, that says more about your state of mind than about my behavior." This is classic narcissistic abuse, making Sarah question her own perceptions and reality. But now that she understands the pattern, his manipulation tactics seem transparent rather than confusing. "You're right," Sarah says, forcing herself to sound convinced. "I'm probably being paranoid because of all the stress from this investigation. Tell me about this vacation you're planning." "I've been moving some assets offshore as a precautionary measure," David explains, warming to his subject. "If the federal government freezes our domestic accounts, we'll still have resources available internationally." "How much are we talking about?" Enough to live comfortably for the rest of our lives, regardless of what happens with the investigation. And if the government seizes our property here, property can be replaced, David says dismissively. What matters is having liquid assets in jurisdictions that respect financial privacy. What about your clients who've lost money? David's expression hardens, revealing the complete lack of empathy that defines his character. My clients knew the risks when they invested with me. If they couldn't afford to lose their money, they shouldn't have been investing in high-yield opportunities. The callousness in his voice is breathtaking. Sarah realizes she's married to someone completely devoid of conscience, someone who can destroy other people's lives without experiencing even a moment of guilt or remorse. When would we leave? Sarah asks. Soon, within the next few days, before the investigation can escalate further. And Jessica will be staying here to help wind down the business. Jessica will handle whatever administrative tasks are necessary during the transition, David says, avoiding the direct lie while not telling the truth. Sarah knows from their coffee shop conversation that Jessica is planning to leave the country with him, but she needs to get David to admit this on tape. David, can I ask you something personal? Of course. How long have you been planning this? He smiles with genuine pride, and for a moment Sarah sees the charming man she fell in love with 20 years ago. Sarah, I've been planning contingencies for every aspect of my business since the day I started the firm. This is just another contingency plan. How long have you been moving money offshore? About 2 years, maybe a little longer? As soon as I realized that financial regulations were becoming more restrictive, I started diversifying our holdings internationally. And how much have you moved? Enough to ensure our financial independence, regardless of what happens with the domestic investigation. What about the people who invested with you? What happens to them if their money's gone? David's patience is wearing thin, and Sarah can see the cold calculation behind his charming facade. Sarah, you're asking a lot of questions for someone who claims to want to work together on this? I'm just trying to understand the situation so I can help, Sarah says quickly. I want to make sure we're handling this in the best possible way. The best way to handle this is for you to pack a bag and be ready to leave when I tell you to. Everything else will work itself out. Of course, I just want to make sure we're doing the right thing for everyone involved. The right thing is protecting ourselves and our future, David says firmly. Everything else is secondary. Sarah realizes she's gotten everything Rebecca needs. David has admitted to moving money offshore, to planning to flee the country, and to his complete indifference toward the people he's stolen from. Most importantly, he's revealed his sociopathic worldview where other people's suffering is irrelevant as long as he gets what he wants. I should start packing, Sarah says. Pack light. We'll buy whatever we need once we reach our destination. Where exactly are we going? It's better if you don't know the details yet. Plausible deniability in case anyone asks you questions. David stands to leave, then turns back to her with something resembling affection. Sarah, I want you to know that I'm proud of how you're handling this situation. A lot of wives would have gotten hysterical or started making demands. You're being very mature about everything. I learned from the best, Sarah says, meaning it in ways he'll never understand. You always taught me to think strategically rather than emotionally. Yes, I did. That's one of the things I've always appreciated about you. After he leaves, Sarah sits alone in the apartment, processing what just happened. She successfully manipulated David into incriminating himself on tape, but she also got a terrifying glimpse into the mind of someone who has no moral boundaries whatsoever. The man she married has been replaced by a stranger who views other people as objects to be used and discarded when they're no longer convenient. Her phone buzzes with a text from Rebecca. Perfect. We have everything we need. Federal prosecutors are reviewing the recording now. 20 minutes later, Rebecca and Michael arrive at the apartment, both looking energized by what they've just heard. How do you feel? Michael asks, searching Sarah's face for signs of trauma or distress. Like I've been married to a sociopath for 20 years and never realized it, Sarah says honestly. David showed absolutely no remorse for what he's done to his clients, no concern for how his actions will affect other people. He talked about destroying people's lives like he was discussing stock market fluctuations. The recording is clear and comprehensive, Rebecca reports. David incriminated himself on multiple federal crimes, wire fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, conspiracy to flee prosecution. We'll have arrest warrants by tomorrow morning. What happens now? Now you start your new life, Rebecca says. But first, we need to make sure you're protected. David is going to realize very quickly that he's been set up, and men like him don't handle betrayal well. Are you saying he might be dangerous? I'm saying he's desperate, and desperate people make unpredictable choices. We're going to have agents watching your building tonight, and I want you to stay with Michael until David is in custody. Sarah looks around the apartment that has been her home for 15 years. At the expensive furniture and artwork that now feel like props in an elaborate stage production. None of it belongs to her anymore, and she's surprised to discover that she doesn't care. The life she thought she wanted was built on lies and other people's suffering. I'll pack a bag, she says. As Sarah gathers clothes and personal items, she finds herself selecting practical things rather than luxury items. The designer dresses that were essential for charity galas and business events feel like costumes for a role she no longer wants to play. Instead, she packs comfortable clothes, books she's been meaning to read, and the few pieces of jewelry that have sentimental rather than monetary value. Michael helps her carry her bags to his car, and as they leave the building, Sarah feels like she's emerging from a prison she didn't know she was trapped in. The doorman, who has greeted her politely for 15 years, nods as they pass, unaware that he's witnessing the end of an era. Are you scared? Michael asks as they drive through the city toward his apartment near the church. Terrified, Sarah admits, but also relieved. I feel like I've been holding my breath for years, and I can finally exhale. You realize your life is going to change dramatically. I know, no more penthouse, no more designer clothes, no more social events where I pretend to be someone I'm not. I'll probably have to get a job for the first time in 20 years. How does that make you feel? Sarah considers the question seriously. Excited, actually. I haven't been able to make my own choices or pursue my own interests in so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to have autonomy. Michael's apartment is a modest two-bedroom space filled with books, comfortable furniture, and evidence of a life dedicated to service rather than accumulation. Sarah sets up in the guest room, hanging her few clothes in the small closet and arranging her books on the nightstand. That evening, they order Chinese takeout and eat at Michael's kitchen table while watching the local news. Sarah half expects to see reports about David's investigation, but the lead stories are about city politics and a water main break in Brooklyn. When will this become public? Sarah asks. Probably within 48 hours of David's arrest. Rebecca says the media will be very interested in the story's successful businessman, socialite wife, multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. I should call Emma before she sees it on the news. Sarah dials her sister's number, calculating the time difference to figure out whether she's interrupting their honeymoon in Tuscany. Sarah, how wonderful to hear from you. Emma's voice is bright with happiness. Italy is absolutely magical. Jake and I are having the most amazing time. I'm so glad you're enjoying yourselves. Emma, I need to tell you something important, and I want you to hear it from me before you see it anywhere else. What's wrong? You sound serious. David is about to be arrested for financial crimes. Securities fraud, money laundering, stealing from his clients. The FBI raided our apartment, and it looks like he's going to prison for a very long time. Silence on the other end of the line. Long enough that Sarah worries the call has been disconnected. Emma, are you there? I'm here. Sarah, are you okay? Are you safe? I'm safe. I'm staying with Michael until David is in custody. What does this mean for you? It means I'm getting divorced, and I'm probably going to lose everything we own together. The house, the apartment, the bank accounts, all of it was probably purchased with stolen money. I'm coming home right now. Absolutely not. Enjoy your honeymoon. There's nothing you can do here except worry, and I'm in good hands with Michael. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I know how much you love David. I loved the man I thought he was, Sarah says. But that man never really existed. I've been married to an illusion for 20 years. Whew. They talk for another 20 minutes, with Emma alternating between outrage at David's crimes and concern for Sarah's emotional well-being. Sarah finds herself comforting her sister rather than needing comfort, which surprises her. I'm proud of you, Emma says before they hang up. I know this must be devastating, but you sound stronger than I expected. I feel stronger, Sarah realizes. For the first time in years, I feel like myself again. After the call, Sarah and Michael sit on his small balcony overlooking the city. The lights from thousands of apartments create a tapestry of individual lives, each window representing someone's private world of hopes and struggles. "What are you thinking about?" Michael asks. "All the people living in those apartments who trust their financial advisors, who believe their retirement savings are safe, who have no idea that someone they trust might be stealing from them right now. You're going to help prevent that from happening to other people." "I hope so. I keep thinking about what David said about his clients deserving to lose their money if they couldn't afford the risk. That's not how trust works. When you give someone the responsibility to manage your money, you should be able to trust that they won't steal it. You're going to make a powerful witness when this goes to trial. If it goes to trial, Rebecca thinks David might plead guilty to avoid a longer sentence." "How would you feel about that?" Sarah considers the question. "I think I'd prefer a trial. I want other people to hear what he's really like, to understand how someone can live a double life so completely that even the people closest to them have no idea who they really are." "That's going to take courage. I have more courage than I used to. Losing everything you thought you wanted has a way of clarifying what actually matters." That night, Sarah lies in Michael's guest bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of his neighborhood. The traffic is lighter than around her penthouse, the sirens more distant, the overall atmosphere calmer and more residential. For the first time in months, she sleeps deeply and dreamlessly, her conscience clear and her future, while uncertain, finally her own to determine. The next morning, Sarah wakes to the smell of coffee and the sound of Michael moving around his kitchen. Sunlight streams through the guest room windows, and for a moment she forgets where she is and why she's there. Then reality floods back the wire, the confession, the imminent arrest of her husband of 20 years. She checks her phone and sees 3 missed calls from David, all placed between midnight and 2 a.m. She doesn't listen to the voicemails. "Good morning," Michael greets her as she enters the kitchen. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months, actually." "Is that strange?" "Not at all. You've been living with enormous stress and uncertainty. Now that you've taken action, your mind can finally rest." Sarah pours coffee and sits at Michael's small kitchen table, which is covered with newspapers and printed articles about financial crimes. "Research for your next sermon. Research to better understand what you're going through. I want to be able to support you through this process. Have you heard anything from Rebecca this morning?" As if summoned by her question, Sarah's phone rings. "Rebecca." "Good morning, Sarah. I have news. David was arrested an hour ago at Jessica's apartment. Apparently, he spent the night there, which suggests he was planning to accelerate his escape timeline." Sarah feels a complex mixture of relief, vindication, and unexpected sadness. What happens next? Arraignment this afternoon. The district attorney is requesting no bail, given the flight risk and the evidence of offshore accounts. We'll know more after the hearing. Will I have to be there? Not unless you want to be. But Sarah, there's something else you should know. When they arrested David, Jessica was with him, and she had $500,000 in cash, plus what appears to be a fake passport. The scope of David's planning is staggering. He wasn't just prepared to abandon his marriage and his responsibilities, he was prepared to assume a completely new identity if necessary. What about Jessica? Is she being charged? She's been arrested as an accessory, but she'll probably cooperate with the prosecution in exchange for a reduced sentence. She's young and scared, and she clearly didn't understand the full scope of what she was involved in. After the call, Sarah sits with Michael over breakfast, trying to process the reality that her husband is now in federal custody. "How do you feel?" Michael asks. "Numb, mostly, and relieved, but also sad, which surprises me." "You're grieving the end of your marriage, even though you know it was the right thing to do." "I'm grieving the marriage I thought I had, not the one I actually had." "That's completely normal." Sarah's phone rings again. This time it's Emma, calling from Italy. "Sarah, I saw the news online. The arrest is being reported by every major financial publication. Are you okay?" "I'm okay. Actually, I'm better than okay. I'm free." "I'm so proud of you. The articles I've read suggest that you cooperated with the investigation. That must have taken incredible courage." "It took anger more than courage. Once I understood what David was really doing, what he was planning to do to me, I couldn't just stand by and let it happen. They talked for 20 minutes, with Emma offering to cut her honeymoon short and return to New York immediately. Sarah refuses, insisting that there's nothing Emma can do except worry unnecessarily. I promise I'll call you if I need anything, Sarah says. But right now, I need to focus on figuring out what comes next. That afternoon, Sarah and Michael watch the arraignment coverage on the local news. David appears in handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit, looking smaller and older than Sarah has ever seen him. The confident businessman who commanded respect in boardrooms and charity galas has been replaced by a frightened man who realizes his carefully constructed world has collapsed. When the judge denies bail, citing flight risk and the discovery of cash and false identification documents, David's composure finally cracks. His shoulders sag, and for just a moment, Sarah sees the fear and desperation he's been hiding behind his arrogance. "Your Honor," David calls out as the bailiffs prepare to lead him away. "My wife knew nothing about any of this. She's completely innocent." It's the first completely truthful thing he's said in years. Rebecca arrives at Michael's apartment that evening with a thick folder of legal documents and financial statements. "I have some difficult news about your financial situation," she begins, settling into Michael's living room. "The federal government has frozen all accounts associated with David's business, including your joint personal accounts. You currently have access to about $15,000 in your personal checking account, plus whatever assets you own independently." Meaning what exactly? Your jewelry, your car, your personal belongings that can be clearly documented as gifts or personal purchases unrelated to David's business activities? The apartment, the house in the Hamptons, the investment accounts all frozen pending the outcome of the criminal case? So I'm essentially broke. For now, yeah. But Sarah, there's good news too. Because you cooperated with the investigation and provided crucial evidence, the district attorney is recommending that you receive priority consideration when they recover assets for victim compensation. What does that mean in practical terms? It means you won't lose everything. The government understands that you were as much a victim of David's crimes as his clients were. You'll have to downsize significantly, but you won't be destitute. There's something else, Rebecca continues. Several media outlets have contacted my office asking for interviews with you. Apparently, there's significant public interest in your story. I'm not ready for that. You don't have to decide now. But Sarah, your story could help other women who are living with financial abuse and narcissistic manipulation. There are thousands of women who need to hear that they can survive leaving a controlling partner. That evening, Sarah sits on Michael's balcony, staring out at the city lights and contemplating her future. 6 months ago, she was Mrs. David Matthews, wife of a millionaire, living in a penthouse apartment and attending charity galas in designer gowns. Now she's a 42-year-old woman with $15,000, no permanent address, and no clear plan for the future. But for the first time in years, she feels hopeful. The cage door is open, and she's ready to discover who she can become when she's not trying to be someone else's idea of the perfect wife. Her phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Matthews, this is Jennifer Walsh, the documentary filmmaker Rebecca mentioned. I'd love to discuss your story when you're ready. Your experience could help countless other women." Sarah stares at the message for a long time before responding. "I'll consider it. Give me some time to process everything that's happened." As she prepares for bed in Michael's guest room, Sarah thinks about the woman who caught the bouquet at Emma's wedding just 6 days ago. That woman was hoping for a renewal of her marriage, a return to the happiness she thought she had lost. This woman, the woman she's becoming, has discovered that sometimes the best renewal comes from having the courage to end what was never real in the first place. 3 months after David's arrest, Sarah signs the lease on a one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn Heights. The space is a fraction of the size of her former penthouse, but the large windows overlooking the harbor fill it with natural light, and the neighborhood has a sense of community that was completely absent from her previous life in Manhattan's luxury high-rises. "It's perfect," Emma says, examining the apartment with the eye of someone who has just returned from an extended honeymoon in Italy. She's glowing with the kind of contentment that comes from being truly happy, and her pregnancy is beginning to show in the gentle curve of her still small belly. "It feels like me," Sarah admits, running her hand along the exposed brick wall that the landlord left original when renovating the space. I'm not sure I knew what that meant before, but this apartment feels authentic in a way my old life never did. Tell me what you mean by that. Sarah considers how to explain the transformation that has been taking place in her life since David's arrest. When I was married to David, everything in our home was chosen to project a certain image: success, sophistication, wealth. The furniture was expensive rather than comfortable. The art was selected for investment value rather than personal meaning. Even the books on our shelves were chosen because they looked impressive to visitors. And now I'm choosing things because I like them, because they make me happy, because they reflect who I am rather than who I think other people want me to be. Over the following weeks, Sarah slowly furnishes her apartment with items from estate sales, thrift stores, and small local shops. Each purchase represents a small declaration of independence: a comfortable reading chair in soft blue fabric, bookshelves made from reclaimed wood, art created by local artists whose work speaks to her personally rather than making a statement about her social status. The process of creating her own space proves surprisingly therapeutic. For 20 years, Sarah's environment was controlled by David's preferences and the need to maintain their public image. Now, for the first time since college, she's making decisions based solely on her own taste and comfort. I never realized how much energy it takes to pretend to be someone you're not, Sarah tells Dr. Jennifer Chen during one of their therapy sessions. Dr. Chen specializes in narcissistic abuse recovery, and her office has become a safe space where Sarah can process the complex emotions surrounding her divorce and David's criminal conviction. Many women in your situation struggle with guilt, Dr. Chen observes. They feel responsible for not seeing the signs earlier, for staying in the relationship too long, for the damage their partner caused to other people. I do feel guilty, Sarah admits. All those investors who lost their retirement savings, I was living off their money for years without knowing it. Every designer dress, every expensive dinner, every charitable donation that enhanced our social status was paid for with stolen funds. Sarah, you were a victim too. You had no knowledge of David's crimes, and when you discovered them, you took significant personal risks to stop him. You're not responsible for what he did, but you are responsible for what you do now. Watch, what do you mean? You have a choice. You can spend the rest of your life feeling guilty about the past, or you can use your experience to help other women avoid what you went through. This conversation plants a seed that grows over the following weeks. Sarah begins volunteering at a nonprofit organization called the Women's Financial Independence Center, which helps women escape financially abusive relationships and rebuild their lives. Her experience as David's wife, combined with her college degree in social work that she hasn't used in 20 years, makes her uniquely qualified to understand what these women are experiencing. When I first met my husband, says Maria, one of the women Sarah counsels, he seemed so successful, so generous. He paid for everything, told me I didn't need to work, that he wanted to take care of me. That's exactly how it starts, Sarah agrees, recognizing the pattern immediately. They create financial dependency under the guise of love and generosity. How did you find the strength to leave? I realized that staying was actually harder than leaving. The emotional abuse, the constant lies, the fear of discovering new betrayals that was destroying me slowly. Leaving was scary, but it was also freeing. Do you regret your marriage? Sarah considers the question carefully. I regret that David turned out to be someone he wasn't, but I don't regret the experience, because it taught me things about myself that I never would have learned otherwise. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing, because it forces you to become who you're meant to be. Working with women who are escaping financial abuse helps Sarah understand her own experience in a broader context. She learns about the patterns of narcissistic manipulation, the deliberate strategies that controlling partners use to isolate and control their victims, the way financial abuse intersects with emotional and psychological abuse to create complete dependency. The goal isn't just to escape the relationship, explains Dr. Patricia Monroe, the center's director. The goal is to help women develop the confidence and skills they need to build independent lives. Many of these women have been told for years that they're incapable of surviving on their own. Sarah thinks about her own journey toward financial independence. 6 months after David's arrest, she received a call from Detective Williams informing her that the government had recovered approximately $18 million from David's offshore accounts. After compensating his clients, approximately $2 million remained in assets that could be considered legitimate marital property. As David's ex-wife, and given your cooperation with the investigation, you're entitled to half of the remaining legitimate assets, Detective Williams explained. $1 million not enough to return to her previous lifestyle, but enough to provide security while she builds a new life on her own terms. What I'm learning, Sarah tells Dr. Chen during a session 6 months after David's arrest, is that financial independence isn't just about having money, it's about having the confidence to make your own decisions and the skills to support yourself emotionally and practically. How has your relationship with money changed? I'm much more conscious of where money comes from and what it represents. When David was managing our finances, money felt almost abstract numbers in accounts that I never saw. Lifestyle choices that I never had to fund directly. Now I'm aware of every dollar I spend and every dollar I earn. Phenomenon, you're working now, part-time at the center, and I'm starting a master's program in social work in the fall. I want to formalize my education so I can do this work professionally. How does it feel to be pursuing your own career goals again? Terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. I haven't been a student in 20 years, and I've never had to support myself financially as an adult, but I'm discovering that I'm much more capable than David led me to believe. This realization that she has been systematically undermined and diminished by someone who claimed to love her represents one of the most painful and liberating aspects of Sarah's recovery. For years, David convinced her that she was too naive and impractical to handle real-world responsibilities. He positioned himself as her protector while actually making her increasingly dependent and vulnerable. Women supporting women is crucial to recovery from narcissistic abuse, Dr. Chen explains. You need to hear from other women who've survived similar experiences, and you need to be able to help other women who are where you used to be. Sarah's work at the center becomes a source of meaning and purpose that was completely absent from her life as a wealthy wife. Instead of attending charity galas where she wrote checks to causes she barely understood, she's now directly involved in helping individual women rebuild their lives. Sarah, I need to tell you something, says Lisa, another woman she's been counseling. 6 months ago, I was living in my car because I was too scared to leave my husband. Today, I signed the lease on my own apartment and started a job that will let me support myself and my children. You helped me believe that was possible. Moments like this provide Sarah with a sense of satisfaction that no luxury purchase or social event ever gave her. She's discovering that meaning comes from service, that confidence comes from competence, and that happiness comes from authenticity rather than accumulation. 8 months after David's arrest, Sarah receives an unexpected phone call from Rebecca Cooper. I have some new, Rebecca says. David wants to see you. Sarah is sitting in her small apartment, grading papers for a social work class she's auditing to prepare for her master's program. The request catches her completely off guard. Why, he didn't specify, but the request came through his lawyer, so it's official. He's serving his sentence at a federal prison in Pennsylvania, about 3 hours from the city. What did he plead guilty to? All charges: securities fraud, money laundering, wire fraud, conspiracy to flee prosecution. He'll serve 12 years minimum, possibly 15 depending on his behavior in prison. And Jessica? 2 years for being an accessory, but she'll probably serve 8 months with good behavior. She cooperated fully with the prosecution and provided evidence about other aspects of David's operation that we wouldn't have discovered otherwise. Sarah considers the request for several days. Part of her is curious to see how prison has changed David, whether he's capable of genuine remorse or if he's still the narcissistic manipulator she divorced. Another part of her never wants to see him again, preferring to leave that chapter of her life completely closed. What would you hope to accomplish by seeing him? Dr. Anchen asked during their session. I'm not sure. Closure, maybe. Or maybe I want to see if he's capable of taking responsibility for what he did. And if he's not, then at least I'll know for certain that leaving was the right choice. Sarah, you already know that leaving was the right choice. You don't need David's permission or validation to move forward with your life. Dr. Chen is right, but Sarah decides to make the visit anyway. Some questions can only be answered face-to-face. The federal prison is a sterile, intimidating complex surrounded by high fences and guard towers. Sarah goes through extensive security screening before being led to a visiting room that looks nothing like the dramatic settings portrayed in movies. It's brightly lit and institutional, filled with plastic chairs and vending machines. David is already seated at a small table when Sarah enters. Prison has aged him dramatically. His hair is grayer, his face is thinner, and he's lost the confident bearing that once made him seem larger than life. The expensive suits have been replaced by a standard prison uniform that makes him look ordinary and diminished. "Thank you for coming," he says as she sits across from him. "I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I would either. Why did you want to see me?" "To apologize." "For what? Specifically?" David looks surprised by the question, as if he expected a general apology to be sufficient. "For everything. For the lies. For the betrayal. For destroying our marriage." "What about the people whose money you stole?" "That was business. Sarah, that's different." And there it is, the complete inability to acknowledge the harm he caused to anyone outside his immediate circle. Even after 8 months in prison, even after losing everything, David still can't comprehend that his victims were real people whose lives he destroyed. "You're not actually sorry," Sarah realizes. "You're sorry you got caught." "That's not true." "David, I've spent the last 8 months learning about narcissistic abuse and manipulation. I know exactly what you're doing. You want me to forgive you so you can tell yourself you're not the villain in this story." His expression hardens, revealing the cold calculation that Sarah now recognizes as his true nature. "I tried to give you a good life. I provided for you, protected you, gave you everything you could have wanted. You gave me the things you thought I should want. You never asked what I actually wanted or needed. What did you want that I didn't give you? Honesty, respect, partnership, the right to make my own choices about my own life. You think you're so much better than me now," David says, his carefully controlled facade beginning to crack. "You think leaving me makes you morally superior. I think leaving you makes me free. Free to do what work at some nonprofit for $30,000 a year, live in a tiny apartment in Brooklyn. You had everything as my wife. I had the illusion of everything, but it was all built on lies and stolen money." David leans forward, his voice dropping to the manipulative tone Sarah remembers from their worst arguments. "Sarah, you need to be realistic about your situation. You're 43 years old with no real work experience. Do you really think you're going to build a meaningful career at this stage of your life?" "I'm already building a meaningful career. I'm helping women escape situations like the one I was trapped in." "Trapped?" David's voice rises. "You lived in a $3 million penthouse. You wore designer clothes, traveled the world, attended the finest cultural events. That's not trapped, that's privileged. It's trapped when none of it reflects your actual choices or values. It's trapped when you're financially dependent on someone who uses that dependency to control every aspect of your life. I never controlled you. You controlled everything. Where we lived, how we spent our time, which friends we socialized with, what charities we supported. I couldn't even choose my own clothes without considering whether they fit the image you wanted to project. That's called being a team. Sarah, that's called supporting your husband's career." Sarah stands to leave, recognizing that this conversation will never lead to genuine accountability or remorse. "I hope you find some peace in here, David. I hope you eventually understand the damage you've caused. But I'm not going to be part of your redemption story." "Sarah, wait." She turns back to him one final time. "Do you hate me?" Sarah considers the question honestly. "No, I don't hate you. I feel sorry for you. You had everything: a loving wife, financial success, respect in the community, and you threw it all away because you couldn't stop wanting more. You couldn't appreciate what you had because you were always focused on what you could take from other people. I never meant to hurt you. Yes, you did. Every time you chose Jessica over me, every time you lied about where you were going, every time you dismissed my feelings or opinions, you meant to hurt me. You just didn't think there would be consequences." Sarah walks toward the exit, then stops and turns back one final time. "I want you to know that I'm happy now. Happier than I ever was as your wife. I have work that matters, relationships that are honest, and a life that belongs to me. You set me free. David, you just didn't mean to do it." In the parking lot outside the prison, Sarah sits in her car for several minutes, processing the conversation. The man she married or thought she married never really existed. David was always exactly who he revealed himself to be today, someone incapable of genuine empathy or accountability. But seeing him diminished and powerless also provided unexpected closure. The man who once controlled every aspect of her life is now completely powerless to affect her future. His opinions about her choices, his predictions about her failure, his attempts to make her doubt herself, none of it matters anymore. Sarah drives back to New York feeling lighter than she has in months. The last tie to her old life has been severed, and she's finally free to become whoever she chooses to be. 1 year after catching Emma's bouquet, Sarah stands in the same church where her sister was married. But this time, she's here for a different kind of celebration. She's graduating from an accelerated master's program in social work, and today marks the beginning of her new career as a counselor specializing in financial abuse recovery. "I'm so proud of you," Emma says, adjusting Sarah's graduation cap. At 8 months pregnant, Emma glows with the contentment of someone living an authentic life built on mutual respect and genuine partnership. "You've completely transformed yourself in just 1 year. I feel like I'm finally living my real life instead of the life someone else designed for me," Sarah replies, smoothing down her simple black dress. Unlike the expensive designer gowns she wore as David's wife, this outfit was chosen for comfort and appropriateness rather than image and status. The graduation ceremony is held in the church's main sanctuary, the same space where Sarah caught the bouquet that symbolically began her journey toward independence. 12 women are receiving advanced degrees in social work, each representing a story of determination and resilience. Father Michael gives the opening blessing, and Sarah catches his eye as he speaks about service, compassion, and the courage required to help others heal from trauma. His own journey over the past year has been remarkable. He's become an advocate for victims of white-collar crime and has testified before Congress about the need for stronger protections for families affected by financial fraud. "Today we celebrate not just academic achievement," Michael says, his voice carrying throughout the sanctuary, "but the decision to dedicate your lives to helping others rebuild and recover. You are living proof that our most difficult experiences can become the foundation for our most meaningful work." After the ceremony, Sarah mingles with her classmates and their families in the church's social hall. These women have become more than fellow students. They're sisters in the truest sense, bound together by shared experiences of trauma, recovery, and the determination to use their pain to help others. "Sarah, I want you to meet someone," says Dr. Patricia Monroe, the director of the Women's Financial Independence Center, where Sarah has been working. "This is Jennifer Walsh, the documentary filmmaker I mentioned." Jennifer is a woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and the kind of unpretentious confidence that comes from meaningful work. "I've been following your story through Rebecca Cooper and Dr. Monroe. I'm working on a documentary about women who've escaped financially abusive relationships, and I'd love to include your experience." "What kind of documentary?" "Something that shows other women that it's possible to leave controlling partners and build independent lives. Too many women stay in dangerous situations because they believe they can't survive financially on their own, or because they've been convinced they're not capable of managing their own lives." Sarah thinks about Maria, Lisa, and the dozens of other women she's counseled over the past year. Each of them arrived at the center convinced they were helpless, dependent, incapable of survival outside their abusive relationships. Each of them discovered strengths they didn't know they possessed. "I'd be interested in participating," Sarah says, "but I want to make sure the focus is on helping other women, not on sensationalizing my personal story." That's exactly what I have in mind. Your story is powerful because it shows that financial abuse can happen to anyone, regardless of education or social status. But more importantly, it shows that recovery and independence are possible. They exchange contact information, and Sarah files the conversation away for future consideration. Today is about celebrating her achievement and looking toward the future she's building. As the reception winds down, Sarah finds herself standing alone in the church sanctuary where Emma was married exactly 1 year ago. The afternoon light streaming through the stained glass windows creates the same rainbow patterns on the floor, but everything else about her life has changed completely. Reflecting on the year, Michael approaches, having changed out of his ceremonial robes into casual clothes, reflecting on everything. "A year ago, I thought my life was over. I was 42, financially dependent on a criminal, and had no idea who I was outside of being David's wife. And now I'm 43, financially independent, And I know exactly who I am. I'm someone who helps other women discover their own strength and build their own lives. Any regrets? Sarah considers the question seriously. I regret that it took me so long to see the truth about David. I regret that other people were hurt by his crimes, and I regret that I enabled his behavior by being willfully blind to the signs. But I don't regret the journey that brought me here. What's next for you? I start my new position at the center on Monday. Full-time counselor working with women who are escaping financial abuse. I have my own apartment, my own car, my own bank account that no one else controls. For the first time in my adult life, every decision I make is mine alone. How does that feel? Terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. But mostly, it feels authentic. I'm not performing a role anymore. I'm just being myself. They walk out of the church together, passing the exact spot where Sarah caught Emma's bouquet a year ago. The symbolism isn't lost on either of them. You know what's funny, Sarah says. I did catch the bouquet for good luck, just not the kind of luck I thought I was catching. What do you mean? I thought it was supposed to bring me a happy marriage. Instead, it brought me the courage to end an unhappy one and build a life that actually belongs to me. Outside the church, Sarah hugs Michael goodbye and walks to her car, a reliable Honda Civic that she bought with her own money and chose based on her own needs and preferences. It's not the luxury vehicle she drove as David's wife, but it represents something much more valuable, the freedom to make choices based on her own values rather than someone else's expectations. As she drives back to Brooklyn, Sarah's phone rings. Detective Williams. Sarah, I wanted to give you an update on the asset recovery process. We've located an additional $1.3 million in a Swiss account that David failed to disclose. As his ex-wife and the person whose cooperation was crucial to the investigation, you're entitled to half of those recovered assets. Sarah pulls over to process this unexpected news. $650,000 more money than she's ever controlled in her own name. What do I need to do? Nothing immediately. The paperwork will take several months to process. But I wanted you to know that your financial security is even more solid than we originally projected. After she hangs up, Sarah sits in her car, thinking about what this money represents. She could buy a larger apartment, take an extended vacation, invest in luxury items that would elevate her lifestyle. But mostly, she thinks about the women she works with who need financial resources to escape abusive situations and rebuild their lives. Her phone buzzes with a text from Emma. Congratulations on your graduation. Jake and I are so proud of our favorite social justice warrior. Can't wait to celebrate with you this weekend. Sarah smiles and types back, thank you. I love you both. Can't wait to meet my nephew when he arrives. As she pulls back into traffic, Sarah thinks about the documentary filmmaker's offer and the opportunity to share her story with a broader audience. The woman who was terrified of attracting attention or causing controversy has been replaced by someone who understands that her experience can help other women find their own path to freedom. Her phone rings one more time as she's parking outside her apartment building. The caller ID shows the number for the center's crisis hotline. Sarah, this is Dr. Monroe. I know you don't officially start until Monday, but we just received a call from a woman whose situation sounds very similar to what you experienced. Her husband is a prominent businessman, and she just discovered he's been hiding money in offshore accounts and planning to leave the country. She specifically asked to speak with someone who's been through something similar. I'll be right there, Sarah says without hesitation. Because this is who she is now, a woman who shows up for other women, who uses her experience to light the path for others walking through darkness, who understands that the most meaningful life is one dedicated to service rather than accumulation. Sarah Matthews, former wife of a millionaire ex-husband, survivor of narcissistic abuse, and living proof that midlife transformation is possible, has finally become exactly who she was meant to be herself. As she changes direction and heads toward the center, Sarah catches her reflection in the rearview mirror. She's wearing a simple dress she chose herself, driving a car she bought herself, going to help a woman who desperately needs to know that survival and independence are possible. The woman in the mirror is glowing with purpose and self-possession. She looks exactly like someone who caught a bouquet and found the perfect new beginning, not in marriage, but in the courage to build an authentic life based on her own values and choices. The woman who was afraid to make waves has learned to navigate her own storms. The woman who was financially dependent has achieved true independence. The woman who lived to please others has discovered the joy of pleasing herself while serving something larger than her own comfort. Sarah's midlife transformation is complete, and her real life, the life she was always meant to live, is just beginning. And she knows with absolute certainty that the best is yet to come, because for the first time in her adult life, she's the author of her own story. The bouquet brought her luck after all, just not the kind she expected, and infinitely better than anything she could have imagined.